Hi YouTubers, welcome back to my channel, Vintage Fashion Hat Chat. I'm Norma Shepherd, the director of the Mobile Millinery Museum and the author of 5 books including 1,000 Hats, I usually say that, but also including Accessorizing the Bride, Vintage Wedding Finery Through the Decades. And the reason I'm talking bridal today is I have it a bit on the brain. We did have a family wedding over the weekend, but also someone has donated to the museum recently a 1956 wedding gown in lovely condition, and I wanted it complete with its wedding veil and headpiece, so I thought I would just talk a little bit about that today. I am unaware of whether you are familiar with the aesthetic of 1950s wedding gowns, but wedding gowns are always sort of they come at the end of a fashion show. They're the epitome of the aesthetic of the particular era and a good example of the prevailing style. Of course, in 1947, Christian Dior created his new look post Second World War, which did away with fabric rationing. Now, designers could go crazy, and lots of fabric was used, particularly with wedding gowns. And for the most part, these were ball gown length, although there were some that were ballerina length mid-calf. Bodices were very fitted, and the skirts were voluminous. I'll start with the book just to show you an example. So I want to show you an example of the type of gown I'm talking about, because I'm not going to show you the recent donation in its entirety. That's too difficult to do. This one on your right is, I think it's on your right, is what I'm referring to. So tight fitted bodice, lots of tulle overlay, some satin, often, and some lace. Some years ago, we participated in an exhibit of vintage and antique wedding gowns at Casa Loma, and that was quite a lot of fun to do. The thing about bridal finery is there is such a temptation to experience it, not just visually, but to get the whole tactile experience, particularly these gowns in the 1950s with the contrasting tulle, lace, satin, just exquisite. And we knew that this would be a bit of a challenge as visitors filed through, so the gowns were placed very carefully on mannequins behind stanchions, but inevitably as people filed through, so many people just leaned over the stanchions and just wanted to give in to that temptation to feel the gowns, feel the fabrics. So having said that, the gown I'm going to show you today, as I said, was 1956. So this style that was, I would say, inaugurated by Christian Dior's new look in 1947, was still quite popular in the mid-50s. So there's lots to this gown. I'm going to start by showing you the bodice. Which is a tulle overlay on satin. Of course, brides always need to determine, do they want the white or do they want the champagne? And this one was the white, the snow white. Look at the lovely sleeves that are lacy. This is the overlay without the satin lining, and you can see that it is a lovely netting that is embroidered with lace. And then along the collar there is a bit of the tulle that is not embellished, that gives the illusion of sort of nakedness along the collar, along the boat neck. Now the bodice is very tight fitting, but then immediately after that, the skirts begin to puff out And you have this wonderful layer of lace and some more tulle underneath, layers and layers and layers till we get to the hem. And in the back, of course, the backs of wedding gowns always have to have some interest, because that is what the congregation is looking at as the bride is standing in the front taking her vows. And this is so typical of not only the 1950s, but most of the early decades of the 20th century, the covered buttons. And of course you would need some help to get out of these. It's always great when the headpiece is included with the gown when we get these donations. They aren't always original to the gown, but this one is. So many brides would loan their wedding veil and headpiece to their friends, and that was often the something borrowed that people wore. What I love about this is not only the fact that it looks sort of crown-like, sort of tiara-like. It's done on satin. There's little tiny pearls, and also some set-in rhinestones. And the sequins, you can see that they pick up the light. I think there's some coating on them, some aurora borealis type coating that gives them a little bit of colorful sparkle in yellow and pink, which would completely mirror the confetti that's going to be thrown at this gown in, you know, little bits of pink and yellow and blue paper. We don't do that so much anymore. The caretakers of churches, I guess, have had their say. And then, of course, you have a couple layers of tulle with lace embellishment. Usually the shorter layer goes over the bride's face if she wishes to be veiled as she comes down the aisle. And this particular veil, the length of it goes to about the hip. But some of them were cathedral length. Some of them went even beyond the hem of the gown, although mostly that would be in the case of a gown with a train. So for the most part, the style in the 1950s wasn't that your gown would have a train. It would just puff out at the waist, and the hem would end at your toe. Now I want to show you another one. Before I do, I will just flip to a page here in the book Accessorizing the Bride, and give you an idea of how the style in the 40s would differ from the 50s. So these are both very sleek, slim silhouette gowns from the 1940s. The cream colored one, actually the whitish one here, is a jersey knit. This one with the red velvet coat is cream satin. So cream champagne colored satin was very popular in the 1940s. The gowns were not poofy like I've showed you with the 1950s tulle. So often the headpieces were also fashioned from satin. Almost looks like a pizza pie shaped slice there. And this is a triangular shaped headpiece done in cream color, champagne colored satin. You can see that the button is covered and forms the center interest, and then loads of little pearls have been stitched onto the satin. So this again would be handmade and would take a fair bit of time. Headpieces and veils were fairly expensive, of course. It's not just the gown. Bridal gowns have their own accessories, so there you go. Of course, something old, something new, something bored, something blue. So if I were attending a wedding today, I might choose this hat to wear just as a nod to the something blue. This is a Fascinator by Maria Kiersick. The swirly sort of interest at the front is vintage straw, and I will show you the back, because again, it's not just the bride who has her back to the congregation. Often the rest of the congregation can look at what people in front of them are wearing, and this is the back, even more detailed than the front, and styled with some vintage florals in shades of blue, done on a hairband, simple hairband. Also has an elastic chignon strap which can help you secure the hat under your hair, and you're good to go. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, hit like, share, subscribe, and until we meet again on Monday, have a hatty day.